What is up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we have a review of Fear Factory and their new album Aggression Continuum via Nuclear Blast Records. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Fear Factory is of course the legendary industrial metal band formed back in 1989 and responsible for benchmark albums in the genre such as Demanufacture and Obsolete. Aggression Continuum is the band's 10th studio album following up 2015's Genexus, marking the band's longest gap between albums to date. Now honestly, if you check out my Fear Factory discography tier list, I've been pretty hot and cold with Fear Factory over the years. I loved the early albums and was pretty impressed by 2010's Mechanized, but everything else has been something of a roller coaster for this band. That said, when they dropped lead single Disruptor, I was all ears. This track is just a gent machine that almost rivals Meshuggah in its punishing grooves. Which, while we're at it, is also true of later track Collapse, one that I simply cannot resist bobbing my head to. Then there's those orgasmic bass breaks and the tension-building ascending portions leading up to the chorus. I resist the powers that be. Admittedly, I'm not in love with the singing on the chorus itself, but I love the subtle synth atmosphere behind it. Perhaps more impressive though is opening track Recode. I am absolutely awestruck by its symphonic flourishes and classic industrial percussion. The string orchestration makes this track sound more epic in scale than perhaps anything else the band has ever attempted before. And that clink 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 of steel marries those modern touches with their early roots. Going back to the synth work on this album, Purity has some really cool parts as well. I wasn't too fond of how the band tried to incorporate in the more melodic elements on Genexus, which was very much like oil and water in execution. But here it feels much more effectively folded into the core of their sound, never losing sight of where they come from, even when invoking some pretty blissful backing soundscapes. But for those just looking for more straight bangers, you won't find yourself disappointed in the slightest. Cognitive Dissonance, Aggression Continuum, and Manufactured Hope all would have been right at home on Demanufacture or Obsolete with their seemingly infinite breakneck chugs. Aside from the more polished production job and some of the choices with the synth, I honestly would have believed someone if they told me that these were some recently recovered B-sides. You want nothing in the rise, you have been. Likewise, second single Fuel Injected Suicide Machine, what a metal as fuck title by the way, has some of Fear Factory's heaviest verses of their career, though once more offset by a chorus that really drifts into the stars with its sparkling atmosphere and further layered string arrangements. Admittedly, some may end up finding this a little sappy, but I think it's the perfect harmonious yin and yang of the polar opposite moods that this band is capable of conjuring. Now, if there is one track I'm not that into, it's probably Monolith. Definitely not hate-worthy or anything, I just find the chord progressions and overall songwriting to feel a little bland in comparison to the other songs. It never seems to reach the aggressive or melodic heights of the rest of the album over its runtime. Nice solo though. I'm not really feeling End of the Line as much either, but I think that it mainly has to do with its placement in the track listing, as by this point the album kind of feels like it's run its course. On its own it works fine, but by track 10 it kind of feels like a bit of a retread of ideas covered even more effectively by previous songs, just longer with an interlude outro and more repetition. If you ask me, you snip off these final two tracks and the album is a much more concise statement and just overall stronger for it. But really, this is a very minor critique of an album that I very much enjoyed, honestly, surprisingly so. In fact, I'd call it one of the band's best and at bare minimum in their top 4 or 5. Turning to my scales, I give Aggression Continuum a 9 for enjoyability. It's not not perfect, but damned if it doesn't come close, and for my money is easily one of the most consistently enjoyable industrial metal albums I've heard in years. I give it a 9 for musicianship. I've certainly heard much more technical albums this year, but even so, for the genre and just for the band, it's a pretty impressive display on all fronts. And I give it an 8 for innovation. It's great to see that even after decades of existence, not only are Fear Factory willing to take chances on evolving their sound, but have managed to do so quite successfully. So an 8.7 overall and a very strong B+ for Fear Factory and Aggression Continuum. Get it once more via Nuclear Blast Records, but don't go anywhere because this week you should also check out Alustrium and their new album A Monument to Silence via Unique Leader Records. Alustrium is a Philadelphia-based progressive death metal band I'd recommend to fans of Necrophagist and Warforged. The more I listened to this album, the more I wanted to do a full-length review on this one, but unfortunately without the name recognition, it just makes more sense to get more eyes on them in this format. In any case, picture a fusion of the songwriting of mid-career Opeth with the likes of Obscura and Fallujah. The result is a stunning and seeming unending cascade of incredible riffing that, similar to Hans Grossman, never sacrifices catchy melodicism in its reign of impressive technicality. In fact, the melodeath elements on this album are some of the best I've heard in years, calling back to the days in the early 2000s, drooling over the dueling guitars of In Flames and drifting melodies of Dark Tranquillity. Additionally, tracks like The Plea also bring comparisons to the likes of Between the Buried and Me in their broadened dynamics. Admittedly, at over an hour, it's a touch overlong, but even so, it's a very impressive outing that you definitely need to check out. Y'all, thanks for watching, and be sure to check out my Fear Factory discography tier list and my industrial metal band tier list after this one. And then just stick around in general for more full album reviews, interviews with bands on the podcast, you name it, we've got it, so plenty of reasons to subscribe if you have not already. You can also chat with me and a few other channels as well on the Discord and support me on Patreon, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.